Hello, everybody. It's Grizzly from Lexington, Kentucky. How are y'all doing today? Do I have a surprise for you? I got one heck of a guest waiting backstage.
Come on.
Go grab a drink.
Come on.
Grab a chair. How you doing today, sir?
Good, Mr. Christopher. Would you prefer Mr. Grizzly or Mr. Christopher?
Grizzly, please. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name is Tony Sivalelli. I've been a UFO researcher, remote viewer, study of out-of-body experiences, looking at various things of the paranormal, but what got me into all of it was the study of unidentified flying objects, which now is called UAPs.
Right.
But also USOs, a very strong interest in that as well. What I put together is sometimes when I do these type of shows, Grizzly, is I put together a slideshow. So not only can the audio be heard, but also some visual if some of your followers would like that. So kind of like a little show and tell Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. It's all yours.
You got it, sir. Thank you. Okay, I think you have to put them on the screen from your end.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to you, Grizzly, for having me here, and also for your audience that's coming in. I always like to give a thank you to the people that I trained under, the organizations under them, in particular, Professor Courtney Brown of the Farsight Institute, my studies at the Monroe Institute, many others as well. Everybody from Joe McMonical to Skip Atwater, Paul Smith, Russell Targ, many people. All of this is, in my humble opinion, what you're going to hear. What happened to me, roughly the interest, I wouldn't say the interest started, but something happened at the age of 7 when I was a youngster. I went to bed on a school night, and I remember closing my eyes, and literally for 3 to 5 seconds after that, I opened them. And my mother came into the bedroom and said, "You got to get going, get ready for school." And I said, "I just closed my eyes. I've got to get to sleep." And she said, "Oh, if you don't get going, you're going to be late." So she cracked the curtains a bit, and obviously it wasn't quite what I thought it was 5 seconds ago. I said, "Man, I just closed my eyes." And I remember her saying, "You just had a good night's sleep." And I thought to myself, you know what? I've had a lot of good night's sleeps, but nothing ever like this before. So even at that age, I knew something was odd with how we understand time. Fast forward this and go into early part of high school. I had this independent reading class, and I took out a book, and it was titled Chariots of the Gods, which a lot of your followers are no doubt familiar with, by Eric von Däniken. And he proposed a lot of theories and asked a lot of questions in this book. And I read that book, and I took notes because I had to give a report on it. And again, it was an independent class, so it was just one-on-one with myself and the teacher. And when it came time for me to give the report, I really didn't even use any of my index cards, and my teacher was pretty, impressed in that I was rattling off all this information about different locations, different structures, architectural going-ons, geoglyphs, things of that. And I asked him, I said, "Why isn't this information out there? I mean, why doesn't more people look into this?" And he really didn't have an answer. He was just more happy that I got pretty enthusiastic about it and gave a good report. But it kind of stuck with me that perhaps the idea of ancient astronauts and ancient aliens had visited us and had something to do with everything from irrigation to worship to monument to structures to architecture, all kinds of different things that may have been part of our early ongoings with potential contact from what I call, and in my book, which is titled Ambassadors of the Stars, not of this earth intelligences. So you fast forward a bit, I opened up a business, a fitness center. I was also a personal trainer there, but somebody gifted me a book titled Embraced by the Light. It was by a lady by the name of Betty Eady, who had what we would call a near-death experience. And one of the chapters in her book, it was titled Other Worlds, really stood with me. And it was happening where she was getting this guidance from a quote-unquote spirit guide, and she was taken to another world. And she was shown that some of these worlds, in particular, one or two of them that had been shown, were also travelers and may have come back here to Earth in our distant past. And that immediately clicked a memory, jarred my memory to Chariots of the Gods. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I also felt it was interesting when she talked about that particular chapter of other worlds, and she had this near-death experience, that she wasn't allowed to remember a lot of it as well. So I thought that was interesting. Still running my business, early 90s, mid 90s. I came across the Fox documentary Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, and I remember watching that, and it was repeated 2 or 3 times on the Fox broadcast network. And I remember watching it and thinking to myself, I'm not sure if this is real or not, this particular alien autopsy, but something that really struck with me was when they interviewed some of the guests that were on there, people like Frankie Rowe, Jesse Marcel Jr., Walter Hout, etc., that had connections, via whether it was parents or good friends or family that were right there at the alleged Roswell incident in 1947 about the UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. For instance, Frankie Rowe, her father was in the fire department. Jesse Marcel Jr. was part of the 509th Bomb Group, where his father went and was one of the first to the crash debris area and brought back, some of the pieces of the crash to his house and showed his wife and his son. And then obviously the whole cover-up began after that, and the newspaper article, etc. It got to the point where I was running my business and I could take some time off, fortunately, and I started to do some traveling because I had after that autopsy documentary, I started reading books and things, started doing a lot of research. So I started doing traveling as well. I went to Area 51, aka Groom Lake, the Funny Farm. S4 has a lot of different names, and we went with some friends. We went out to the black mailbox, which was actually a white mailbox at the time. And we stood there for a while till it got dark. And after that, they started, and on the way out there, I got to admit, we did this, we took a picture. I took a picture. There was this light coming down literally from above and going down into the ground, it looked like, and then back up into the sky. The picture is real. It doesn't do the justification of what we saw, but it's an actual picture of what we did see. So it was an unusual phenomenon going on that day that I took that trip out there to see the Area 51 Groom Lake. But what else went on that evening was that they had what was called war games being played once it got pretty dark out and got later. And these jets would be zooming across the sky. I mean, numerous jets just zooming across the sky. Pretty soon the whole atmosphere was filled with smoke. And I remember tears were literally coming out of everybody's eyes just because there was so much going on. But then I noticed off to the side in a mountainous area that this light came on. And it started moving around slowly, and then it started moving back and forth at an extreme speed. And it just seemed like it was just one particular craft maybe that was going back and forth at an incredible speed. It was going so fast, I mean, you couldn't keep track of it, but it seemed like the overhead that was going on the war games was kind of like a ruse to kind of keep everybody's attention on that and all the noise. And then some of us caught, and looked at that particular object. Now, am I going to say it was an actual UFO from another world? No, but, my gut feeling tells me I saw something that had back-engineered technology and uses gravitics and magnetics, something that we're not privy to right now, and the technology was pretty advanced in what I was looking at there. Also, trips I had was to Sedona, Arizona. I did some hiking. A friend of mine, Helio Rodriguez, was also the guide. He was kind enough to share some information and a story that happened to him while he was in Hawaii some years back, a UFO experience. After that, next summer I went, that was the summer of 2000, I took a trip out to Roswell, New Mexico. It was for the anniversary there at that time. And I went to the museum. I went to different locations there, talked to some different people, met Walter Hout. You see in this picture with me standing here, and he was the public information officer at the time. He wrote the above caption in the Roswell Daily Record, the RAF, which is Roswell Army Airfield, captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. He talked to me about what, he wrote and what he saw. He also said to me that he saw debris, and then he told me he saw bodies. And at that time, and this was after the alien autopsy had been on, that was few years back, and this was 2000 here, nobody, or he never really talked about he had seen bodies. So I was kind of wondering, wow, why would he say this to me? But he knew my interest was quite sincere. And I kind of just left it at that. I never talked about it. But later on, he's, like deathbed statement, and between himself and his daughter, I believe it was, he released some documents that said he did indeed see bodies at the Roswell crash. So I thought that was interesting, and that he shared it with me. Again, I didn't talk about it until after he let it out that he had, went over that particular data with me. I started to go to different conferences, met different people like Command Sergeant Major Robert O'Dean, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. They both caught my enthusiasm after I met up with them at a couple different conferences, mainly the International UFO Conference in Rosslyn, Nevada, and they shared information with me, and I put some of these notes and etc. into the book I wrote, which is again titled Ambassadors to the Stars. And it was quite interesting what they had to share, and that I kind of soon put together the bits and pieces of information they were giving me and what was going on, that there's kind of a slow indoctrination process going on here, Grizzly, that one group that's in some power does want this information to come out, but slowly, like each subsequent generation may be more privy to what's going on than the next. And then there's another group that's in power as well. It doesn't want really anything to come out and wants to keep the kind of status quo system that we have going on. And that made a lot of sense. Again, here's some images, just me at the conferences, some of the different conferences. I then got into the idea again of exploring the ancient astronauts, ancient aliens, all that type of thing, and back to like what the Von Daniken book had talked about, but started looking into more of it. I met up at one of the conferences, Giorgio Sokoloff from Ancient Aliens, had some conversations with him and some other people as well. Then I got into the whole idea of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, and that made perfect sense to me because Earth is 70-75% water. This is kind of what tipped it over for me, Grizzly, was that something was going on in the oceans. There were too many people that had seen things. I also took it upon myself to talk and chat with some various naval people. A couple of their stories and incidences are in the book as well. I thought it was fascinating. Again, it made a lot of sense that this was going on. I know some people talk to me about, oh, this is all negative and it's demons and things like that. And that didn't sit with me. I'm not saying there aren't negative energies. Of course, there's always positive and negatives out there. But what would demons have to do with, USOs, nuts and bolts crafts going in and out of the water? So I knew something else was really going on. And that's not to dismiss, there's a lot of advanced technology and black operation projects as well, because there very much is, and that's a large part of what I think UFOs and some USOs are as well. But I also believe there's many other things going on. I looked into concepts, and these were two other things I think are going on, of time travel and other dimensions. It started making perfect sense. Quantum physics I started looking at. At first when I got into this, it was more about astronomy and learning about, Van Allen belt and rotations of planets and centrifugal forces and gravity. But as I got more and more into it, sir, it got more into the quantum physics aspect of it. And that's where even J. Allen Hynek was quoted at one time saying, when we do discover the secret of UFOs, it's going to be one hell of a quantum leap. And I think he really meant quantum physics on that. So it started making sense. I started looking time travelers from the future, the book by Dr. Bruce Goldberg, Dimensions, the book by Professor Jacques Vallée. I also started looking into the media. Some Hollywood types were at some of these conferences as well. I think that makes sense. It started making sense with that slow indoctrination process, that each subsequent generation would be more open to these ideas than the last. One thing is, maybe not many people know this, is that the Roswell crash of July 1947, exactly 1 year later, almost to the date, is when Warner Brothers released the idea of Marvin the Martian on the big screen. But then you got into the 50s, you got into all the sci-fi movies, the black and white movies, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and The Day the Earth Stood Still. Then into the 60s, you had Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits, and then Star Trek came out with the idea of civilizations working together and different groups working together amongst the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. All the way to, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and X-Files, etc., etc. Everything that's been coming out lately, it's all in cartoons, etc. And during part of this, in the late 90s and 97, I also looked and heard of the idea of remote viewing, and I'll get into how that started as well. Briefly, in the 1970s, physicist Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, psychologist Charles Tart had an interest in the paranormal and parapsychology. They worked out of Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in California. What they did is they brought in a renowned psychic from the East Coast named Ingo Swann. Swann was also an artist, but he was also a gifted psychic. They brought him out from New York to the West Coast, and together they worked on a series of protocols and phases that went from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind, to pen to paper, and it produced psychic-like results, and they called this remote viewing. Remote viewing really was just a name, and SRI was also a think tank for various corporations, including the military, and the intelligence community got wind that this was going on, and they got a hold of the group out of SRI and said, wow, we've dabbled in this a little bit ourselves. We'd like to know, do you think you could take this to the next level? We'd like to give you an exploratory grant. And the group out of SRI said, yeah, that would be great. So they gave him a grant for quite a bit of money at the time, and this was the early 1970s. And what they did is they brought in a couple of scientists that had interest in paranormal and parapsychology events and things, and they brought in several so-called psychics. They brought several more in, along with Ingo Swann, and together they tweaked the protocols and phases once again, and military met up with them again and said, you know what, we're still interested in this, and we'd like to know, do you think you can work with some of our people and teach them this, what you call remote viewing? And said, yes, we do. We think we can teach them. So again, the Reader's Digest version is they interviewed quite a few different people. They put together 6 people that they felt were good to work with this particular program to kind of teach them to become quote unquote psychic spies. And this went back and forth for nearly 20 years, and different people came back and forth and in and out of the program. It went under various names: Project Grill Flame, Project Centerlane, Project Stargate, Gondola Wish, etc. Here's one of the pictures of one of the groups here. Paul H. Smith, who was one of them, was kind enough to share this image of Project Centerlane. And one thing they all kind of had in common is that the 6 initial people that they had worked with this group, they all had things like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, had seen UFOs, had seen ghostly apparitions, artist ability, things like that. So this went on for nearly 20 years, and some of it started leaking out in the general populace, Grizzly, and the History Channel got wind of it, and they approached the group out of SRI and said, you know what? We find this pretty fascinating. Is this true that the military has been working for quite a while with psychic and psychic phenomena? And they didn't deny it because, they were kind of put on the spot, and it would be a lot more trouble than it was worth probably. And so they admitted that they were working with this program, and the History Channel said, we'd like to do a documentary on this, and they were okay with it as long as they had a say on how to put it together. So they sent out a gentleman by the name of James Schnabel. Schnabel was a sci writer. He was also an author, a journalist. He started interviewing some of these people that were involved in the program. He learned that the Russians may have been doing it just as long, if not longer, than the U.S. It had Canadian ties as well. And he got pretty fascinated with the whole subject, so he started writing a book about it on the side. The documentary came out in 1993, and it was titled The Real X-Files, which coincidentally was the same year the TV series The X-Files started as well. After this came out, this documentary, the cat was obviously out of the bag, and the military had a backup plan. And so what they did is they hired a third party to come in and take a look at everything, and they did. And they came back after a couple months and said, you know what, we don't think it's worth the resources you guys are putting into this program. We advise just to shut it down. So they, quote unquote, officially shut it down, in the 94, 95 area, but not before a second documentary came out. And this is where I came involved. And I saw this. It was on the Nightline TV show on ABC. It was a half-hour documentary, and it was about the program. And I remember watching this and thinking to myself, well, who would have thought this? Military is working with psychics and this type of psychic phenomena. So I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. Again, I was researching UFOs, definitely reading up on it. And then I got to see the actual History Channel documentary. It was on a rerun. And what happened there was I got one particular interview that really stood with me. It was when Schnabel from the History Channel was interviewing one of the military remote viewers. He said sometimes when they were really looking at sensitive targets, things like underground missile silos, biological weapons depots, nuclear submarines, things of that ilk, they would get these unidentified flying lights coming in and out of the sessions when they were doing remote viewing. I thought that was fascinating. So I wanted to get this perspective. So I thought this would be great to get this perspective to look at the whole UFO phenomenon. So I go out, beat the streets, try to find Remote Viewers, The Secret History of America's Psychic Spies by James Schnabel, but I couldn't find it. This was before Amazon, before internet shopping, that type of thing. But I did come across a book at one of the bookstores I went to, I should say, and it was titled Cosmic Voyage by a professor at Emory University named Courtney Brown. He was a teacher of nonlinear mathematics and social sciences, and he teamed up with one of the ex-military remote viewers, and they used the tool of remote viewing to look at the idea of UFOs, potentially what we would call extraterrestrials, visiting Earth. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I buy this book. It's very interesting. I read it. In a few days, the first part of it basically talks about some of the people and the training that was involved. The bulk of the book was the sessions, remote viewing sessions by Professor Brown and the ex-military remote viewer. They came to the conclusion in their remote viewings that there was not one group coming to Earth, but several, and that they had been doing so for quite a long time, and their agendas varied. And then at the end of the book, it had the ability to get a hold of somebody out of the office that Courtney Brown worked or put together. It was called the Farsight Institute. So I called them because I had questions about the book and a little bit about remote viewing. The secretary was also a good, established viewer at the time as well, talked to me. She sensed my enthusiasm and said, you know what, Tony, we're going to start teaching classes to learn remote viewing to civilians. It's going to be called scientific remote viewing. She asked me if I was interested. I said, I am interested, but I don't think I'm ready for this type of thing yet, but I'll definitely keep it in mind. And she said, okay. And she said, if you have interest, you might want to take a course in meditation first. And that was part of what was on the training with what I read up in the Cosmic Voyage as well. So I hang up the phone, and I remember thinking to myself, Grizzly, man, that's just too deep for me. I'm just learning how to swim here. I'm like putting my foot in the deep end of the pool. But a couple of days go by, and I woke up. I thought, I want to take this course in meditation. So what I do is I sign up for a course of meditation, and I also had taken hypnotic classes as well, and it was called the Transcendental Meditation, the Maharishi Vedic Schools. And it was about a 6-week-long course, and I took this course. It was an hour or two each time, and I also reread the book Cosmic Voyage at the same time. And the time I was done with that course, I said, you know what? I'm ready to take the Farsight Institute's scientific remote viewing course. So I call back, get set up, go down there. This is me with a group of 14 other people, 15 other people total. And I took the course Basic Scientific Remote Viewing 1 week in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was in pretty good shape, I felt at the time, because I was working out, was a personal trainer, etc. And I didn't lift anything more than a pen that week, Grizzly, and I was exhausted by the end of the week. I remember that. It was a mental exercise that was really strong. But it was fascinating. I was fortunate to be one of the first people to have a breakthrough session in remote viewing. And by the time the end of the week rolled around, everybody that took that class knew there was some merit to this and that there was something to it and that it worked. From there, they suggested, they're going to have more advanced classes later on, but also to look in and study the out-of-body experience. And that's where I went to the Monroe Institute. Again, that was part of Professor Brown's training. I also learned it was part of the ex-military remote viewers. They spent a week-long course in the study of the out-of-body experience as well at the Monroe Institute. And basically, remote viewing and the study of the out-of-body experience involved gaining information from taste, sight, touch, sound, and smell without being there firsthand, but coming back and recording it from pen to paper. And that's basically what we did also at the Monroe Institute, which was the study of the out-of-body experience. I went back to the Monroe Institute in '98 for another week-long course. This one had an emphasis on remote viewing because 2 guest speakers were there as well, Joe McMonagle and Skip Atwater, former of the military remote viewing units. And then I went back to the Farsight Institute in 2002, took a more advanced course in study of remote viewing as well, scientific remote viewing. And between 1997 and 2003, I literally remote viewed and or monitored hundreds of targets. Now, am I going to say I'm an expert at it? No. But I've had some good, quite a few good sessions myself, but I've also had some bad ones. But I definitely know the parameters, the protocols, the phases, and I now teach scientific remote viewing as well. And I've participated in several projects. Most of my remote viewing, 90% plus of it, has nothing to do with the paranormal, but one project that I did participate in 2010 was called Evidence of Artificiality on Mars. And we were all blind to the target. It was 10 to 12 other remote viewers, all trained for at least 10 years. And they were from different schools, the Y Guild School, the Controlled Remote Viewing School that's run by Lynn Buchanan, and the Farsight Institute by Professor Brown. And we're just blind, we're given a target. I was asked to participate. I was grateful to do it. And it was basically to find out what this was here. We've got these little three lines, these arrows in this middle black and white picture. Those are from Mars, from the orbital camera, image M110099 from NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We didn't know what this target was, but we got information, pieces of information. All of us did. We got good information about it. Basically, it's all up at my website, www.learnremoteviewing.net. It's on the links page. It's the Evidence of Artificiality on Mars project. And basically what we got for wherever we were viewing, but this was the target, the Mars 3 targets right there, target 1A, 1B, and 1C, that something was going on the surface and underneath Mars, some type of structural building, some type of water irrigation being set up. None of us got a real sense of quote unquote extraterrestrial or a feel of that, but definitely Earth involved with this, people from this planet involved with this, that something was going on, perhaps a terraforming, perhaps, the pictures were from then, at that time, the target right there in black and white, but was this in the future? I don't know. But what we got, was that something was going on, structures being put up, irrigation systems being set up, maybe perhaps a type of terraforming. I personally, in my deductions area, thought I was in an isolated area of Hawaii with volcanic area around and water around it. That's what I thought. My conscious mind came to the conclusion of, but the information was good information, and it was all put together and presented by Professor Brown at the 2011 Society for Scientific Exploration held in Colorado. And that video, it's like a 13-minute video as well, and has a lot of comparisons back and forth, some scientific information, etc. It's an interesting video. It's up at my website as well. And as we get to the end of my slideshow here, a lot of people ask me, well, how does remote viewing, what is remote viewing and how does it work? To get into a little bit of science, we don't know. We have definitive answers what we think might be right now, but they're not the same as they were 5 years ago or 20 years ago, and they probably won't be the same 10 years from now. The double slit experiment is part of it. It's kind of like when you take the electron gun back in the late 1800s. Thomas Young did this experiment. He sent one single electron through a slit, and it just stood as an electron. An electron is the scientific part of the atom that circles around its center. The center is the protons and neutrons. But when he did this, and then it became more with Ingram Taylor, I believe it was, and then Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberger in 1927 out of the Copenhagen Institute. That's when it really came to light because there's a lot of people there, witnesses. They did this experiment, and what happens is you send the electron through. Instead of a single slit, you have a double slit. The electron splits up, so instead of a particle, it becomes a wave, two halves, then it comes back again and becomes a particle again after. Other things, twin telepathy. So there's some type of an electron interface what's going on. And Einstein used to call this spooky action at a distance. There's also the study of twins. Guy Lynn Playfair put this book together, did some studies, and sometimes something would happen to one of the siblings, another sibling, if it was something strong emotionally, would know about it right away, even if they were miles away. And I always felt that was fascinating. Dr. Jacques Vallée, who had to do with the remote viewing program as well. He's an astrophysicist, also a mathematician. He also played the part, well, he didn't play it, but he was represented as the part in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. J. Allen Hynek had a small part in it. But Hynek and Vallée worked together pretty strongly for quite a while. Put this thing together called the Invisible College. It's all information that's out there. And he came to the conclusion of maybe more remote viewing is something more of a consciousness thing. And he called it, and he describes it as this, and I like the way he describes it. I propose to describe consciousness as the process by which informational associations are retrieved and traversed. The illusion of time and space would be merely a side effect of consciousness as it traverses the associations. So those are some of the ideas of what we think maybe remote viewing is. Nassim Haramein, another scientist, again, just a couple more slides here, describes the universe as energy is all-encompassing. It connects by means of fluid-like waves, again, at the smallest level, called Planck waves. He calls this dynamic quantum fluctuations. It's not fluid in the traditional water sense per se, hence cannot be perceived by our five senses. Objects that appear solid move through space, and this quantum fluctuating field, more like a boat that moves on water. An example of this field in a more subtle sense, think of a hawk or a bird flying. At times there's no flapping of the wings as the animal is simply gliding and yet can change and navigate its direction. The gliding from a scientific standpoint using gravity should not be possible by the bird. Yet, as another scientist infers, the bird, which has an innate ability, is not really flying in open air, but is flown by surrounding forces, the quantum wave field that we just talked about, and then it navigates its direction like a boat navigates on water. My explanation of scientific remote viewing is a little simpler. It is a structured method of the SRI methodologies used to gain data based on scientific protocols done through several phases that may allow information to be transferred from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind to pen and then onto paper from a distant location or different time. All of this is done with one's five senses: taste, sight, touch, sound, smell, without being there firsthand. This can be construed as a form of ESP, extrasensory perception. Russell Targ, I have a video of him. He's a physicist, worked on the program early again, the reality of ESP, lots of scientific studies. So there is a lot of science behind this. There's many different styles, none are really the best per se. I've also researched the idea of their connections between near-death experience and some UFOs, because I crossed that. Every serious UFO researcher will eventually come across this particular form of data as well. I looked into the book, and I refer to the book of Raymond Fowler's book, The Watchers 2, exploring UFOs and the near-death experience. His words, the UFO near-death experience connection seems to be telling us that whoever controls the UFO phenomena is intimately connected with the afterlife of human beings. This is a deeply profound revelation with ever-escalating implications for humankind. Whatever the reason, which may be beyond our comprehension, what is called alien interaction seems to be part of a constant interplay between life here and life in the hereafter. So if we take and integrate the tool of characteristics of the UFO and near-death phenomena at full face value, the bottom line implication is death may be the ultimate UFO experience. That's out of Watchers 2 by Raymond E. Fowler. With that said, there may be more. Fowler and many other UFO researchers also acknowledge that some other abduction contact cases are more of a negative. Here, extraterrestrial, time travel, or black ops may be involved as well. It's been reported the so-called gray aliens are often more like worker bees, cyborgs. Towards the end of my research and until now, Grizzly, I've become much more philosophical about all this. There has to be a yin and a yang to everything. You can't appreciate warm if there's no cold. There's no appreciation of blue if there's no green or yellow or white or red. I feel there's a lot of things going on. I look at it as really more of a universal creative source that we're all part of, and that we are part of this in a connected way, kind of like how a drop of blood can tell us a genome program now. Well, a drop of blood 500 years ago couldn't tell us a whole lot, except that it was red or maybe dark blue when it first came out. But now it gives us kind of a map. In a relative way, our essence, our energy may be like this drop of blood, and that we are connected to a universal creative source that is constantly in an interplay back and forth, positive, negative, and what we call here a third dimension where there can be more negatives going on. So I just think, there's a larger picture to all of this. I got philosophical about it. I write about that at the end of the book as well. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who have tuned into this presentation, Grizzly, for having me on, and maybe we got some questions, and we can go into that now if you'd like.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to talk about, Scarborough Sasquatch says hello. Hello back.
Hello.
Let's see here. Media, time travel, TV show, Quantum Leap, or some other examples.
Yep.
Yoga tea. sells very good tea, or he used to. Night Grizz have a good one. That's Jim. But the one thing that's really interesting is that your presentation was excellent, by the way.
No,
I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed it very, very, very much. Um, Back in 1954, allegedly Roosevelt signed a treaty with the aliens in the
Was it
military.
Roosevelt or Eisenhower?
Eisenhower.
Yep.
So
That was after the alleged Iraq Air Force Base meeting. Yep.
that is correct. And his granddaughter came forward, I think, last year and admitted that it happened. I think some other people came forward too that was there present that were guards that admitted that it happened.
Yeah.
So
I've got a lot of that in the book I have too. Like, I don't mean to interrupt you,
do
but
you?
definitely Dr. George Meade, who was an investigator of the paranormal phenomena, he had gotten a hold of this letter that the Ethereans came and met with Eisenhower and leaders of various organizations back in '54 at Iraq Air Force Base. They made up the story that he had a dental appointment and something emergency happened and he was flown away, so to speak, spirited away, and that he had met, one particular group of ETs there, and they showed him some of the craft and the comings and goings, and they called them the Ethereans and how they could disappear. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very interesting story. Maybe it did take place. I mean, I am never definitive with any of it, except that it is going on, but there's a lot of mis and disinformation as well. But I definitely feel that would probably be something that definitely has merit to it.
Well, and I agree with you in that aspect. But if we look back 120 years ago, we were in a horse and buggy.
Yep.
Then you look at your slides, the television. Then you look at between the 50s and the 70s, the technology leap that we received.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of hard to explain in my book. I'm not
You're right.
saying man didn't create some of it, but it's kind of hard to believe.
Well, it might have been like the pyramids and other architecture back in the back in the day. There, maybe we had a hand in some of it. But you're right. 2,000 years ago, we were riding horses, and up until 120 years ago, like you said, we were still riding horses. So what changed so much? And I explore all that, and I did explore it, and I wrote about it too in the book. And you're so correct. I mean, everything changed really quick after the crash in Roswell, the alleged crash in Roswell in '47. If you look at Philip Corso, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, and his information about the book The Day After Roswell, and he wrote that with William Burns, and they took point in bringing the information out that a lot of things were back engineered, that they could back engineer. A lot of it still can't be back engineered, but some of it they did back engineer. And you have night vision and hardware and lasers and chips and all these other things that they Kevlar belt and all these other things that supposedly came about with the implementation of back engineering when they sent them out to the different divisions, whether it was DuPont or Bell Labs, et cetera, and then they came out and somebody was making money off of these things, and that was the first way that you saw some of these different changes that really changed everything. But I am a person that believes even what you see right now, that's probably 50 years behind where even our black ops operations are at. And I'm objective about it. I don't know if we're ready yet publicly to have a lot of this type of technology because of the strength behind it. Because we have gun laws now, we have problems with weapons and things like that. I mean, could you imagine if there was powers that could wipe out those things in a blink of an eye? So I do see, and I looked at it objectively, and again, the whole yin and yang thing, and until we're more ready consciously, we may not be ready for some of this technology. But some of the technology, like you said, is out there right now. Everything from, like you said, the slideshow, the cell phones, the computer and the phone that you have right now that you're using is the same size as the computer or the chip, and then the technology involved in sending the Apollo 11 was to the moon. So.
Well, I mean, look at the first calculator took up the whole floor of the government building.
Yeah, the first computer, you mean, or calculator? Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was out of I think it was 1948 out of the University of Pennsylvania. The first computer was 30 tons and took up 1,800 square feet.
That is correct. That is correct. So you look at the totality of circumstances, it's hard not to believe that we did not have help in some sort of fashion or way from outsiders.
You're a good detective. You're a good detective, sir.
So, with that being said, you talked about how the motion pictures and the governments and some of the agencies were involved. And I usually talk about Will Smith and Independence Day. Are you well familiar with that movie?
I am pretty familiar with it. I'm more versed with the Men in Black movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, but obviously Independence Day as well. You know,
That movie was scrubbed over 13 times before it was actually released for into the movie theaters by the government. And why is that? So, Independence Day. So that is a well-known fact. And, you know, why is the government so much involved with what is coming into the theaters or into our living rooms? You know, why are they now, in the past year or so, slowly leaking footage of UFOs that are being tracked by the Navy and the Air Force? You know, what
the idea, at least, yeah. I would not
what
say
are they
100%.
prepping for?
Yeah, I would not say 100% that those are outside intelligences. There could be advanced technologies at work there, but it's the idea. It's back to the alien autopsy. It's the idea of it actually coming out and getting it in people's minds, subconscious mind. And as I said, I think there's been a program going on, so each subsequent generation is going to be more open to this than the next. And you just can't go, Grizzly, from something that doesn't exist one night to it does exist the next night, something that big. There's got to be that slow process of the maybe, the introduction, the idea, the concept that will take a few generations. And I think that's all part of it.
Well, look at the World of the Worlds or War of the Worlds. I mean, people were committing suicide. It caused mass hysteria.
Yeah, H.G. story there, absolutely. No question about it. Back in the late 30s, was that not on a Halloween night?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And, you know, another thing I like to talk about as well is, you know, Hitler, his technology that he had. You know, it's kind of hard to believe that he actually had the scientists' capabilities of coming up with some of the technology that he had acquired. And, you know, there were accusations that Hitler had his own flying saucer, and people laughed at it for years. And lo and behold, 2 or 3, 4 years ago, they found footage of a flying saucer for 10 to 12 seconds flying over a building with SS on it.
Huh. I wasn't aware of that, but I was, you know, some of my research has led me to Werner von Braun and his, you know, from the Operation Paperclip when they came over here, and that his fascination with space and rockets and the V2 rockets and travel and all of that, and his hand in the moon launch and all of that. That's definitely the public part of it that has come out. And, you know, one of Werner von Braun's statements was that, you know, we had help from others. And then when they asked him close to his deathbed, they asked him, well, what do you think about UFOs and ETs? And his answer was, and I'll ask you what you think this is, and your listeners. He said, well, it's as impossible to confirm them in the present as it will be to deny them in the future. That was his statement. What do you think that means?
You can look at that several different ways, and that takes me back to Ronald Reagan, his famous speech, and don't quote me on it. You know, if alien life, if we were invaded or attacked or somewhat by alien life, the world would forget their differences and come together as one. Yep. And wasn't he the one that started the Star Wars program?
Yes, but he also said after that statement you just said, and isn't alien life already here?
That is correct. That is correct.
So there's
So
different factions and different groups, and people always ask, well, what do you think? Is it ETs? Is it time travelers from the past, from the future? Is it other dimensions? Is it black projects? Is it hoaxes? All of the above.
you're right. And when you talk about the military or some of the unknown government programs that are going on today that we do not know about, that's secretly funded. Yes, I do believe that the technology is 30 to 50 years advanced in what we are seeing now. Absolutely. I think some of the UFOs that we are seeing that are up there in the air that are ours, that has been made. Absolutely.
I agree.
I mean, look at the SR-71 Blackbird, you know, when that got announced. Then the Spy 2 plane or the S2, what was it? Spy 2 plane?
Back in the 60s.
Got shot down. Yep.
Yeah, back in the 60s.
Then the stealth fighter that had to make an emergency landing at the airport, it freaked everybody out. They didn't know what it was. Yeah, they didn't know what it was, the shape, the color, and you know, so I do agree with everything you state, and I think you're very, very accurate. And I loved your slide program. I think you're spot on.
Something a little different to add a little visual to go with the audio, because the audio was all there for people that couldn't see the visual, but it adds a little bit more to the presentation. I thought your audience would appreciate it. I've done a few,
absolutely.
Of these shows.
Oh, absolutely. And but I mean, I always ask people, where do you draw the line in the sand? Because each time you draw a line, you think that you thought that you were right, you're wrong. Yeah. You know, we were taught what does exist and what does not exist. We were taught what we heard, we did not hear.
You're right. We were taught something comes from point A to get to point B.
That is correct.
Some of this stuff goes on simultaneously. It's kind of like the radio dial. You know, you got a radio that doesn't move, but you turn into different frequencies and you shift consciousness, and then you have different energies coming in. You have a sporting event, you have a newscast, you have a weathercast, you have music. The radio's not moving an inch, but you're just tuning into other frequencies of existence. That's why Jacques Vallée in his book Dimensions makes so much sense. That's why time is often considered the fourth dimension. So that's why quantum physics, when J. Allen Hynek, Dr. Hynek, Professor Hynek made that statement, when the truth does come out about UFOs, it's going to be one hell of a quantum leap. And I put it all back to quantum physics. You know, as is below is above. We're starting to find out if there's black holes above. Yeah, they're huge black holes, and they go into perhaps another space-time continuum. But the very finest things, from we have mass that equals molecules, that equals atoms, and the subatomic particles are electrons around the protons and neutrons. But inside of that are, quarks, gluons. Then you go to the idea of string theory, M theory. Then you go into E8. Then you go into other dimensions, and then you've got all these things going on. So maybe these black holes are not only above, but what goes on above is also below, and vice versa. But in a quantum level, they're also below. It's just accessing that data, like quantum leap, or like the TV series Sliders, or just the idea of wormholes. I mean, there's more to this. There's more energy involved in all of this than we can really comprehend. But we're taking it from a third dimensional perspective. We use maybe 10, 15% brain capacity. And I have this idea that the more we use of our DNA, and including junk DNA, Grizzly, the less alien things become.
And I agree with you on that concept. You know, one of my questions is always arisen is that how do you take all these ancient civilizations, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, every one of them just got wiped off the face of the earth.
Right.
No knowledge,
etc.
Right. So what happened to them?
Cyclical. It's all cyclical. The energy, it's that big, that figure 8, the sideways figure 8. I think the source plays itself out, the infinite, omnipresent, one universal source that never started anywhere, because that's 3D thinking, and it doesn't end anywhere. It just simply is. But yet it plays itself out as a constant creating source. It just creates, it explores, it experiences. Yin, yang. That's why I think part of us, Grizzly, is connected to that, because our essence is to create, to explore. We like to create art. We like to create music. We like to procreate. We like to do a gardening. All these different things that are part of creating and part of exploring. That's an innate aspect of our existence, like that drop of blood I talked about earlier. But that's the aspect that's connected to the infinite, the omnipresent source. And that's why I had to get philosophical towards the end, and that's why I am now, and that's why I try to look at everything much more objectively, as opposed to, oh, this needs to come out, or that shouldn't come out, or this is going on, and that's going on. We're just at the tip of the iceberg, and it's infinite, and we're part of something much greater, the essence of who and what we are. Maybe our personalities individually are time restricted, but our essence, our energy is not. And that's what the Monroe Institute taught me when I had started having actual out-of-body experiences, that when I would get outside my body, there'd be a certain level of an astral projection, and I could recognize some of the things around me. But as I got into more of a higher vibratory rate, and it wasn't going up, down, left, right, it was just vibrating, spinning. In my book, I talk about it's like on that little tilt-a-whirl you are on the kids' playground. You're going around and around and spinning, and finally you're somewhere else. But you're not yourself anymore. You're just an energy, and you're aware of so much more. But as I got more into understanding some of that, honestly, what had happened is I had to shut my body down, and I couldn't remember it anymore. I don't remember it. I have to shut my body down, because I think it's a safety mechanism. You just fall asleep because your body can't comprehend, your mind can't comprehend that frequency or these higher frequencies.
No, you're absolutely right. And I will say this to everybody from coast to coast and around the world: us human beings cannot handle the truth. And that is a major fact. And with what he just said, I'm going to bring up Sasquatch and Dogmen. People that do not believe that those creatures exist, they see them for the first time, they wet themselves, they get PTSD, they never go back in the woods, they get scared anytime they see a forest or a tree line, yeah, and you talk to them, off record or on the phone, however, and they will tell you, I just couldn't comprehend what I was seeing.
Right. It's a programming. It's a program that's done from an early age, and like the robot said in Lost in Space, as we were growing up watching, it does not compute.
No, and it really doesn't. And I think more and more people needs to be awakening somehow to understand.
Well, people like you, by doing these shows, that's helping a lot.
It is. And I was on another show today that actually interviewed me. And I know the more and more we bring stuff out like this, and like you are, that we are being targeted by the government somehow, sort of fashion. Don't get me wrong. I know. I've spoken to people that has been targeted before, and certain thing has happened to their electronics and their shows and so forth, allegedly. But,
right.
That's
why I personally think, Grizzly, it's got to come out slow. I'm not for one releasing information out quickly. I just don't think it's the best way to do it. I think there's more damage that can be done that way. That's why I'm very objective about it, yin and yang about it. I really don't think about it that way anymore. I think about it more in terms of how do I get closer to an understanding of a universal creative source. That's why I have gotten much more philosophical. I was really into the whole nuts and bolts and quantum physics and astrophysics and things like that for a while, but now I don't push it in terms of it's got to come out, and it's a big problem if it doesn't. It needs to come out, and it is coming out. I think it's coming out at the pace that people with open minds can take it. I think if it came out any quicker, the ETs must know this, the other powers that be must know this, or else they would just do a flyover. So it's got to be done over time. There's just some people that are awakening and more aware than others. And so maybe for some of them, it's more too slow, but 90% it's the right pace. 95% it might be the right pace. Like you just said it a few minutes ago, most people aren't ready for it. So
No, I agree with you on that.
I'm just doing my part in sharing, but my main thing is just to understand and awaken and evolve to what we're part of.
Well, let me ask
Consciously in the third dimension.
Well, let's talk about dimensions. Let's talk about the Appalachian Trail. Let's talk about Yosemite, Yellowstone. Let's talk about the Alaska Triangle.
And there's all kinds of doorways and gateways and
60,000 people plus has been missing. And, we hear reports that on the Appalachian Trail, people be in a group jogging.
That's on the East Coast, right?
Woman, yes. And the woman would turn around up on the trail, and the group would turn around, and the woman that was in front just disappears without a trace.
And I haven't heard of that, but I'm not saying surprised. I'm surprised at it. I think sometimes there's glitches, and sometimes others want to bring somebody around. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on like that. I mean, it doesn't happen, in the normal media news or it's announced often, but if you dig enough, you'll find different things like you just talked about, cases like that.
And, and I do believe that we do have glitches. That show that's on TV, Paranormal Caught on TV.
Right.
It has some good examples, but some of the examples you got to be careful with. One of the examples I like using is where all the sheep are on the side of the hill and they all just freeze and they don't even move. Is that a quirk in the Matrix? I mean, how do you explain that? To me, our minds are not capable of understanding how things work.
Well, I bet it has something to do with quantum physics and energy, to be able to freeze frame something for a moment or 5 minutes and do something different and move it or whatever. And go, Einstein once said it, I think he said, all time exists all the time. I think once you start getting into those gravitational technologies and magnetics, and you start going into other really quantum realities or the understanding of energies and the whole Philadelphia experiment, etc., things like that, I think somebody's still experimenting. I think somebody comes here and works, and others work, and it's a lab. But I don't think it's just Earth. I think there's numerous planets throughout the star system. I mean, the closest star system to ours is the Andromeda Galaxy, and it has close to 400 billion stars. Think of all the planets on that. And it's all limitless. I think many planets go through that figure 8 infinite type of thing where there's cycles back and forth. It's not just this planet. I mean, I've opened up to much, not that other people haven't, but I've opened myself up to a much larger, to try to take it out of such a subjective and relative way of thinking and look at it objectively. We're just one speck of sand on an endless beach, and a lot of them are going through what we go through right now. Some of them may be 20,000 years ahead of us. Somebody might be 1 million, 10 million years ahead of us. And some of us might, some might be 2 million years behind or 2,000 years behind. And others just get so caught up and evolved to such a state, they just leave this dimension altogether and just go into another realm of existence and become more of a group consciousness. All until it gets to the one consciousness, realizing and being itself, but separating itself simultaneously and playing itself out over and over through various incarnations, infinite existences, and one omnipresent universal creative source.
And I totally agree with you. I think people need to think outside the box, and I think it's the best way to state it.
Can't put source in a box.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like you said, people are brainwashed. They
part of the yin and yang. It's part of what goes on. Yep.
Yeah, and we can talk about evolution all day long. We can talk about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Dogman all day long.
It's a fascinating thing. I don't have nearly the information you do on it, but I always got involved to the point where some of it was UFO connected at times as well. I'm sure you've heard those stories by different respected researchers, etc. So I think that's part of it. Um, but you've covered that well in other broadcasts and other shows, so I can't probably, honestly, I don't have that type of background in research in that particular subject, but I do know, in my opinion, it is connected also to the UFO, UAP, USO phenomena as well. And again, it's another life form, and there may be many different life forms like that on other planets and other realms as well. I like the idea that it could be other dimensional, but also biological too. It doesn't mean it's just limited to one type of being as well, in my opinion. What do you think?
No, I totally agree with you on that concept. I think aliens are abducting women. I do think that women are being impregnated. I think women are being taken back and the fetuses are being removed. I mean, allegedly, that's been proven scientifically when they go to the doctors and get the ultrasound, and the doctor cannot understand why there's not a fetus inside anymore. So, I mean, there's a lot of topics we can cover, but we got a question for you here. It says, Tony, during your investigation research, were you ever approached by any government officials, for example, Men in Black, per se, that wanted to hamper you or regarding looking into UFOs?
I can't say personally on a physical level that I have. Maybe on more of an astral plane level, maybe perhaps. But as I've said before, I'm not one that's trying to bring this out in that perspective. I'm one that's more evolving my own self-consciousness and awareness. And I'm looking at it much more objectively, and I understand where they're at with their role and what they're doing. So I can't say that I looked at it from a negative perspective. I just try to understand how it fits in to where we're at this time space continuum, that work that those people, beings do, and some of them are maybe from the future, past, etc., and can go back and forth. And I understand where we're at as a whole and that it can't be rushed. But my own exploration is my own exploration. My own out-of-body experiences and my own out-of-body experience. My own remote viewing is my own remote viewing experiences, but not from a selfish standpoint, but from a awareness standpoint to get closer to what we call a source energy, that type of thing.
And
so I don't know the perspective on it I once did. I'm looking at it from a different point of view now than I did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and definitely 20 years ago.
And I totally agree with you with that answer. You have to do what you are doing. I usually say on most of my show, take science and throw it out the window, because it's not always nuts and bolts. And there's things that are happening that we do not understand.
Right.
And we cannot understand the concept of certain things that are happening.
Right.
We can look
You're
at
right.
Einstein, we can look at Steve Hawking's.
Well, look at the movie Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones to Will Smith.
Yeah.
1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. 15 minutes ago, you knew you were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
And that's absolutely true. And we can also go back 200 or 300 years and look at the maps that were drawn where the monsters or creatures were sinking big ships and people were seeing mermaids.
Right.
Yeah, and they would always tell me, Grizzly, they're drinking beer while they're on their ships. Well, I don't care how much beer you drink. What they saw is what they're trying to tell us by the maps. And how in the world can somebody do a map of Antarctica without the ice sheets on there? That nobody can ever explain that to me.
It's interesting. I mean, it's fascinating. Every planet that has life that we understand it, and there's different, maybe there's carbon-based and silicone-based. Who knows, on different planets and different realms, but I'm sure every one has a lot of stories and a lot of mysteries to it. And science just tries to explain it from a point that you can replicate it in a laboratory setting. One UFO researcher said it best, and he said eventually science and spirituality will meet because they're trying, science is just trying to explain it from an energy perspective, I think Einstein said something to the effect of, religion without science is lame, and science without spirituality is, limited, so to speak.
And I agree with the concept and thinking that way. David
There's no
Lester,
energy.
yes, absolutely. David Lester says Apollo 11 computer had 2048 words of erasable magnetic core memory and 36,864 words of read-only core rote memory, and ran on 4 kilobytes of memory and 32 kilobytes of hard disk.
David
So,
obviously has his homework there, and obviously the phones we have are much more stronger, it sounds like.
well, I'll tell you what, David Lester and another gentleman, Bo, they're using my fact checkers. They're
Okay.
pretty spot on. So, but it just makes you wonder, because the first computer I bought was back in the mid '90s, and it was an IBM, and I think it was not even 300 megahertz, and I paid $2,800 for it, and
Right.
back then we financed it.
Right.
So, then like you said, look at our cell phones today, the technology that we have.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just really amazing. And where we're going to go and how far we're going to go, I couldn't tell you. Can
Those
Tony
are
talk
good
about
questions.
hologram technology? Can you speak about any hologram technology? Somebody's asking.
Hologram technology, I mean, I think maybe that was used in the past. Maybe some people thought spirits or gods or angels were appearing. I know if you would have took that type of technology, and just put it out in the past, they would have had to come up with some type of an explanation for it. I believe it was probably used in the past. I think, Michael Talbot, and there were people before him about the holographic universe, the projections, and using it at angles and things like that. I have looked into it. I wrote a little bit about it. I don't know a lot of it, again, right off the top of my head, because I usually am not asked about it. But I believe that's part of, and Nassim Haramein definitely talks about it as well, part of all of it. I mean, it's really fascinating from what we learn and what we apply in our everyday lives. What type of technologies, what type of informations that are out there can be mind-boggling. And that's why, as we
You're
use
right.
more and more of our brain capacity, we have to use more of our brain capacity to kind of understand these technologies as well.
You're absolutely right, and I totally agree with everything you're saying.
But
And
that doesn't mean it wasn't tremendous technologies and like the stones that were used before to build the architecture. I think that type of what we call ancient technology, I kind of call it'll be like an ancient future technology. I think there's more energies and things with crystals and things like that. It's just a matter of putting it in the proper sequential development phases and understanding it, our links to it, our minds to it, our minds' thoughts are technology. I mean, again, the more we use of our DNA, our junk DNA, et cetera, the less alien things become around us. But you got to start somewhere. We're on the cycle. It's that infinity loop. We're just one planet in countless planets. We're probably one incarnation in countless incarnations. There's probably infinite dimensions and existences of what goes on. We're just now beginning to open up to those crazy but yet interesting and wonderful possibilities.
and I agree with you once again. But what is the name of the stones that are built here in America with the different verbiage and how Earth and how men were created and so forth, and it got destroyed, I think, last year. You know what I'm talking about?
Not the Georgia Stone, was it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Did they ever figure out who destroyed them?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm aware of what it was, a bit of it, and I've heard of it, obviously, but I haven't looked into that type of thing. I think, unfortunately, information that is around, sometimes it's destroyed or held back. I mean, that's been going on for a long time. I mean, obviously, the whole Bigfoot thing, obviously, there must be a body once in a while that's discovered or a part, but you're not going to hear about it. But yet the Gigantopithecus is on the endangered species in certain areas. It's just, it's interesting. You know, it's there, but you know, what do you do? My point is just to become aware of it, so you are more of a being and becoming more self-realized in this particular dimension of time and space.
And that is correct, because what you do believe in is what is not actually is reality in some point of views I believe in. And it says
Yeah.
how many seconds of the, excuse me, my computer's so far away. How many seconds of time can be frozen, then restarted?
I have no idea.
That I don't
I
either.
haven't-
Now,
I would depend. It would depend on one's technologies.
I have seen videos of people catching flying birds frozen in time, stuck
Yeah.
without
Maybe
flapping
things
their
like the
wings.
Loch Ness Monster might be something like that. Glimpses of another reality at a certain time. I think, you know, Whitley Strieber, you know, a famed UFO contactee, abductee, has talked about how he has had times where either dreams or waking phases where he would all of a sudden be somewhere else at a different time. I've actually had Grizzly where I will be sitting down sometimes and know there's people around me and I'm having conversation with them, and I'd be like in a hypnagogic state. That would be in the theta brainwave state. You've got the delta brainwave state, which is, you know, below 4 hertz. Theta brainwave state is between 4 and 7 hertz, when your body and your mind is more open, but you're actually, it's just before you fall asleep and just before you awake, but it's open to other realms and dimensions of energy. Then you have the alpha brainwave state, which is between um, 8 and 16 hertz. That's your daydreaming state. And then you have the beta brainwave state, which is between 16 and 32 hertz. And that's how the remote viewing and some of the, or more of the out of body experience worked, where we would have headphones on at the Monroe Institute. We would try to get the information to come and record it from the theta brainwave state just before you awaken to the beta brainwave state when you are in your full waking conscious state. And then you want to record those things quickly because you have a notebook next to your cubicle when you're at the Monroe Institute. And you will forget these things. You'll forget them so fast unless you record them right away. It's just a fact. I mean, people can remember a lot of things, but it goes quickly because it's coming from a different frequency of your awareness. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and let's talk about the holograms somebody brought up. You know, there was a famous sportcaster that died. I don't remember who it was.
Harry Carey.
Yes,
The
didn't
video
they?
of the baseball game just recently in
Yeah,
the playoff. Yeah. Or
didn't they do a
the Cubs
hologram of
touchdown.
him and redo
It
his
was a Dreams
voice?
game. Yep.
Yep, and everybody freaked out and couldn't understand what was going
Yeah, some
on.
people thought it was great, and some people didn't like it one bit.
Nope, nope. And so, you know, it just goes to show that what
And
we think.
2,000 years ago, Grizzly, that would have been a spirit being.
Oh, yes, it would have been. It would have been a god. It really would have been.
Absolutely.
Scarborough Sasquatch. Yes, I have a run in with Men in Black. You probably could have, unfortunately. David Lester, the SSS, did you have a deep conversation with Men in Black? And was it side conversation? I don't understand that question. Do you?
No, if he was asking me that, I'm not aware of consciously of it. You know, I would think that, again, my whole thing is to just be more objective about it as opposed to trying to pick points or prove people or disprove people. This is about self-growth and awareness, not from a selfish standpoint, but a universal collective standpoint.
Now he goes on and explains just now it was caught on a video, a bubble that had left a sink of dishes that was stuck in midair, frozen in one spot, not moving for several minutes, that a person, oh, in a person's home on a paranormal caught on tape show. And, you know, it's a lot of things that we see on TV are entertainment for purposes. And a lot of things we see on
That's
TV.
TV, first of all.
Yeah, a lot of things we see on TV, we have to be careful now. Paranormal caught on TV, no disrespect to any of the producers or anybody who's been on that show, But there are some things that I have seen that have been unexplained, that they have tested to make sure that it has not been photographed or photo edit somehow. And it really makes you stop and wonder about time travel, matrix, dimensions, and so forth.
Of course.
So it really does. Then
I agree. And some of it is very probably tainted or bogus as well.
it is. And I
I'm
guarantee
sure there's
that,
some, like your friend there that just mailed that in. I'm sure there's definitely a lot of things as well.
and I guarantee you that that's been scrubbed somehow as well too. I mean, that's just not, pure filtered without being filtered. I mean, David Lester, not really the surrounding me, but one of them did talk or did the talking. And yes, I agree to the terms. This is all I can say for now. And yeah, unfortunately, in this realm of reality that we live in, it goes back to where we are taught what we're supposed to know, and there are things that we're not supposed to know. And that brings up the biblical times where, look at the Bible. Look at how many missing books of the Bible that are not inside the Bible that have been taken out by man.
Right.
And
Book of Enoch, et cetera, et cetera.
that is correct. And the reason why I bring that up is on my administration team for my Facebook groups, I have state police officers, paramedics, psychics, mediums, and a few civilians. And I just got a hold of a Catholic priest, and he's been practicing since 1982. And when I did the interview, I thought I was going to, really give him a little teaching myself. But unfortunately, he spoke so highly about certain things regarding the Bible and the missing books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. No disrespect to anybody's religions, thoughts, views. I do believe. We'll leave it at that. But I about fell in my chair when he started speaking because of what he was saying. And he was the, God of the cloth. And he had the same views as a lot of us people like you and I that think we know the truth, that things have been tainted and distorted, that people want us to know only what they want us to know. And they only want us to know certain things on their terms, not our terms. And it goes back again, sir, like you said, that I don't think a lot of people can handle the truth. I really don't.
Well, in time, pun intended, more will. But that's for a different time and a different place in the infinity loop. And again, this is just one planet at one time in an endless scenario of planets and times and space that it's going on in. So
here's one for us. Once upon a time was a fool who thought he'd find a purpose in life along the way. Well, yeah, that's an old saying. It's true.
yeah.
But the thing though is that, we're not the only people in this universe. There's no way in God's creation that we are by ourselves. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. I believe in your theories. I believe in some of your thoughts. I believe in some of your techniques. I believe the government used some of the techniques that you researched and been taught, especially during the Cold War. I think it was called, was it paperclip? You were saying?
Paperclip was after the World War II, where some of the German scientists were divided
That's
up
right.
to
That's right.
the Soviet or the United States.
That's right. So, it's, and then we bring up once again that the military is 30 to 50 years advanced in technology. And then, we see on TV, the military comes out with this film that they can pull up over a soldier and the soldier disappears. You
Right.
don't see the soldier. And
Well,
no,
it's like the movie The Predator. I mean, the Hollywood comes out with the idea, and obviously some technologies are like that. Um, there's definitely different things that you can flick a switch and have everything that's around you reflected, and it doesn't look like you're even there anymore. Yeah, there's definitely even some of the Bigfoot shows that I've seen have talked about how there has been some type of a uniform where hunters will go out there or certain personnel and they have this type of technology where it's basically reflecting everything around them so you can't see them, but you can only see because of the gear they're wearing what's reflected around them.
that is correct. And a lot of people
I forgot what it was called.
That Bigfoot can cloak, and they believe they can, and they look like
Some of them probably can. I don't think there's just one set group of those particular beings.
well, and like I say, and I say on my shows, nobody's an expert. You know, people
I
are
like
witnessing.
to say, Grizzly, I know nothing and like it, but I'm exploring it and I'm becoming more aware of things. So.
And I always say when people ask me, Grizzly, is this picture video real or real? I always say, number one, I wasn't there. Number two, I never took it. So how can I answer that?
Right.
You know, I have seen stuff that I cannot explain when it comes to photographs. It looks like it came out of the National Geographic magazine. And I pleaded with them, why don't you show and bring this forward and show the world? And the first thing they say is, I don't want people to know that they are here. What's going to happen to them when it's hunting season? I don't want people driving up and down my road. I don't want people camping out.
Right.
You know, I got a family in the Midwest that's been living in this one certain area for over 25 years. He wants to move, but he's got a clan of Sasquatches allegedly, and he's scared to sell. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him. And they leave gifts to each other, trinkets and so forth. And, you know, and that's why I said in the beginning, you know, you draw a line in the sand, eventually you're going to have to remove that line and mark it a little further. So, you know, it's each of their own.
Or just move on to something else that fascinates you.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And David Lester says, makes one wonder what the Ark of the Covenant is all about. Well, you know, and that's really a good question because Hitler was after it for the longest time.
Yeah, probably some type of energy system that was used by others, maybe past civilizations and or ETs, and one and the same possibly. There's been definitely some good episodes on that type of idea, at least part of the episodes, excuse me, on the Ancient Alien program. They definitely look into those things very, very much so. But I have to admit, I do personally have to get going here pretty soon. So.
Okay, well, I tell you, it's been a pleasure. I would like to have you back on the show. I think there's a lot more that we need to talk about, and I think there's a lot more that you would probably like to share. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to actually come onto my show and be able to speak. That's for sure.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure, Grizzly. You're well informed in quite a few of these topics. David and some of the other listeners, I appreciate the questions and the sharing. Hopefully everybody or somebody got a little bit of something out of this today that I could share, you know, with my research and work and projects that I've been on, etc. If you want to learn more about me, I mean, I don't mean to be here sitting promoting, but you can go to my website, www.learnremoteviewing.net. My book is also can be accessed there through the publisher, and but mostly I just thank you for letting me be on and sharing some of my participations in research, and keep up the good work. It's people like you that will help the world vibrate just a little bit higher as what we call time marches on.
And yeah, and I do greatly appreciate you coming on the show and taking time out of your busy schedule. Hey, I do want you back. So let's get together in about 2 or 3 weeks. And I love your presentation. I really do. But the truth is out there, guys, ladies and gentlemen. We have to seek it. But first, like he said, you have to open up your mind.
Yeah.
Think outside the box.
But think positive, white light around you as well. Ground yourself. And it's not about trying to prove everything as maybe as it is your own self becoming more self-aware and maybe connected to. And the more you understand that, the less, again, these other things are alien to you.
That is correct. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the evening. We must be able to go here, unfortunately. But if you want to be on Grizzly's show, all you have to do is email me at Grizzly, the paranormal at gmail.com. Once again, that's Grizzly, the paranormal at gmail.com. From coast to coast and around this world, sir, I thank you for all your hard work and all your information. And ladies and gentlemen, good night and have a great evening.
Namaste, everyone.